You can well imagine how I looked when I stepped from the oak. The Druids had waited for my knock upon the door, and in my silent voice I had said, "Open, it is the god." My human death was long finished. I was ravenous, and surely my face was no more than a living skull. No doubt my eyes were bulging from their sockets, and my teeth were bared. The white robe hung on me as on a skeleton, and no clearer evidence of my divinity could have been given to the Druids, who stood awestruck as I came out of the tree. But I saw not merely their faces, I saw into their hearts. I saw the relief in my yell that the God within had not been too feeble to create me. I saw the confirmation in him of all that he believed, and I saw the other great vision that is ours to see, the great spiritual depth of each man buried deep within a crucible of heated flesh and blood. My thirst was pure agony, and summoning all my new strength, I said, "Take me to the altars. The feast of Samhain is to begin." The Druids let out chilling screams. They howled in the forest, and far beyond the sacred grove there came a deafening roar from the multitudes who had waited for that cry. We walked swiftly in procession towards the clearing, and more of the white-robed priests came out to greet us, and I found myself pelted with fresh and fragrant flowers from all sides, blossoms I crushed under my feet as I was saluted with hymns. I need not tell you how the world looked to me with the new vision, how I saw each tint and surface beneath the thin veil of darkness, how these hymns and anthems assaulted my ears. Marius the man was disintegrated inside this new being. Trumpets blared from the clearing as I mounted the steps of the stone altar and looked out over the thousands gathered there, the sea of expectant faces, the giant wicker figures with their doomed victims still struggling and caging inside. A great silver cauldron of water stood before the altar, and as the priests sang, a chain of prisoners was led to this cauldron, their arms bound behind their backs. The voices were singing in concert around me as the priests placed the flowers in my hair, on my shoulders, and at my feet. "Beautiful one, powerful one, God of the woods and the fields, drink now the sacrifices offered to you, and as your wasted limbs fill with life, so the earth will renew itself. So you will forgive us for the cutting of the corn which is the harvest, so you will bless the seed we sow." And I saw before me those selected to be my victims, 3 stout men bound as the others were bound, but clean and dressed also in white robes, with flowers on their shoulders and in their hair. Youths they were, handsome and innocent, and overcome with awe, as they awaited the will of the god. The trumpets were deafening, the roaring was ceaseless. I said, "Let the sacrifices begin." And as the first youth was delivered up to me, as I prepared to drink for the very first time from that truly divine cup, which is human life, as I held the warm flesh of the victim in my hands, the blood ready for my open mouth, I saw the fires lighted beneath the towering wicker giants. I saw the first 2 prisoners forced head down into the water of the silver cauldron. Death by fire, death by water, death by the piercing teeth of the hungry god. Through the age-old ecstasy the hymns continued. God of the waning and waxing moon, God of the woods and fields, you, who are the very image of death in your hunger, grow strong with the blood of the victims. Grow beautiful so that the Great Mother will take you to herself. How long did it last? I do not know. It was forever, the blaze of the wicker giants, the screaming of the victims, the long procession of those who must be drowned. I drank and drank not merely from the 3 selected for me, but from a dozen others before they were returned to the cauldron, or forced into the blazing giants. The priests cut the heads from the dead with great bloody swords, stacking them in pyramids to either side of the altar, and the bodies were borne away. Everywhere I turned, I saw rapture on sweating faces. Everywhere I turned, I heard the anthems and cries. But at last the frenzy was dying out. The giants were fallen into a smoldering heap upon which men poured more pitch, more kindling. And it was now time for the judgments, for men to stand before me and present their cases for vengeance against others, and for me to look with my new eyes into their souls. I was reeling. I had drunk too much blood, but I felt such power in me, I could have leapt up and over the clearing and deep into the forest. I could have spread invisible wings, or so it seemed, but I carried out my destiny as Mael would have called it. I found this one just, that one in error, this one innocent, that one deserving of death. I don't know how long it went on, because my body no longer measured time in weariness. But finally it was finished, and I realized the moment of action had come. I had somehow to do what the old god had commanded me, which was to escape the imprisonment in the oak, and I also had precious little time in which to do it, no more than an hour before dawn. As for what lay ahead in Egypt, I had not made my decision yet. But I knew that if I let the Druids enclose me in the sacred tree again, I would starve in there until the small offering at the next full moon. And all of my nights until that time would be thirst and torture. And what the old one had called the god's dreams, in which I'd learned the secrets of the tree and the grass that grew and the silent mother. But these secrets were not for me. The Druids surrounded me now, and we proceeded to the sacred tree again, the hymns dying to a litany which commanded me to remain within the oak, to sanctify the forest, to be its guardian, and to speak kindly through the oak to those of the priesthood who would come from time to time to ask guidance of me. I stopped before we reached the tree. A huge pyre was blazing in the middle of the grove, casting ghastly light on the carved faces and the heaps of human skulls. The rest of the priesthood stood round it waiting. A current of terror shot through me with all the new power that such feelings have for us. I started talking hastily. In an authoritative voice, I told them that I wished them all to leave the grove, that I should seal myself up in the oak at dawn with the old god. But I could see it wasn't working. They were staring at me coldly and glancing one to the other, their eyes shallow like bits of glass. Mael, I said, do as I command you. Tell these priests to leave the grove. Suddenly, without the slightest warning, half the assemblage of priests ran towards the tree. The other took hold of my arms. I shouted for Mael, who led the siege on the tree, to stop. I tried to get loose, but some 12 of the priests gripped my arms and my legs. If I had only understood the extent of my strength, I might easily have freed myself, but I didn't know. I was still reeling from the feast, too horrified by what I knew would happen now. As I struggled trying to free my arms, even kicking at those who held me, the old god, the naked and black thing, was borne out of the tree and heaved into the fire. Only for a split second did I see him, and all I beheld was resignation. He did not once lift his arms to fight. His eyes were closed, and he did not look at me, nor at anyone or anything. And I remembered in that moment what he had told me of his agony, and I started to cry. I was shaking violently as they burned him, but from the very midst of the flames I heard his voice. Do as I commanded you, Marius. You are our hope. That meant get out of here now. I made myself still and small in the grip of those who held me. I wept and acted like I was just the sad victim of all this magic, just the poor god who must mourn his father, who had gone into the flames. And when I felt their hands relax, when I saw that, one and all, they were gazing into the pyre, I pivoted with all my strength, tearing loose from their grip, and I ran as fast as I could for the woods. In that initial sprint, I learned for the first time what my powers were. I cleared the hundreds of yards in an instant, my feet barely touching the ground. But the cry rang out immediately. The god has flown, and within seconds the multitude in the clearing was screaming it over and over as thousands of mortals plunged into the trees. How on earth did this happen? I thought suddenly that I'm a god full of human blood and running from thousands of Celtic barbarians through this damned woods. I didn't even stop to tear the white robe off of me, but ripped it off while I was still running, and then I leapt up to the branches overhead and moved even faster through the tops of the oaks. Within minutes, I was so far away from my pursuers that I couldn't hear them anymore. But I kept running and running, leaping from branch to branch until there was nothing to fear anymore but the morning sun. And I learned then what Gabrielle learned so early in your wanderings, that I could easily dig into the earth to save myself from the light. When I awoke, the heat of my thirst astonished me. I could not imagine how the old god had endured the ritual starvation. I could think only of human blood. But the Druids had had the day in which to pursue me. I had to proceed with great care, and I starved all that night as I sped through the forest, not drinking until early morning, when I came upon a band of thieves in the woods, which provided me with the blood of an evildoer and a good suit of clothes. In those hours just before dawn, I took stock of things. I had learned a great deal about my powers. I would learn more, and I would go down to Egypt, not for the sake of the gods or their worshippers, but to find out what this was all about. And so even then, you see, more than 1700 years ago, we were questing. We were rejecting the explanations given us. We were loving the magic and the power for its own sake. On the third night of my new life, I wandered into my old house in Massilia and found my library, my writing table, my books, all there still. And my faithful slaves overjoyed to see me. What did these things mean to me? What did it mean that I had written this history, that I had lain in this bed? I knew I could not be Marius the Roman any longer, but I would take from him what I could. I sent my beloved slaves back home. I wrote my father to say that a serious illness compelled me to live out my remaining days in the heat and dryness of Egypt. I packed off the rest of my history to those in Rome who would read it and publish it, and then I set out for Alexandria with gold in my pockets, with my old travel documents, and with 2 dull-witted slaves who never questioned that I traveled by night. And within a month of the great Samhain feast in Gaul, I was roaming the black, crooked, nighttime streets of Alexandria, searching for the old gods with my silent voice. I was mad, but I knew the madness would pass. I had to find the old gods, and you know why I had to find them. It was not only the threat of the calamity again, the sun god seeking me out in the darkness of my daytime slumber, or visiting me with obliterating fire in the full darkness of the night. I had to find the old gods because I could not bear to be alone among men. The full horror of it was upon me, and though I killed only the murderer, the evildoer, my conscience was too finely tuned for self-deception. I could not bear the realization that I, Marius, who had known and enjoyed such love in his life, was the relentless bringer of death.